For everyone who's not as familiar with residential permit parking, which is RPP, it has been established in the 1970s, specifically to make it easier for residents and their visitors and landlords to park close to the homes. And by now we have also a few organizational permits, specifically for home healthcare services or schools. The program has 26 RPP zones at the moment, but it is an opt-in program. So anyone who wants to participate can petition if the street in front of the home has not been restricted yet. As soon as it has been restricted, there is no way out. One has to buy a permit or park off-street. There is an option to remove RPP. We have gotten requests over the years, but usually they don't go through with removal in the end because it needs a consensus, a majority on the whole street block to approve the removal. So when it comes to the operation of the program, I want to give a quick overview. In 2024, as an example, we served about 7,400 households. And when I say household, I mean household addresses. And so there can be multiple applicants living at an address. So we serve about 8,200 customers annually, approximately, and issue about 20,000 permits a year. And I do want to lay out a little bit what that administrative process involves, because I want to make a clear distinction of what electronic permitting will actually improve and what not. So as soon as people apply for their permit materials, our staff reviews the applications for eligibility. And there are different requirements that someone has to fulfill. As soon as those are checked and eligibility has been confirmed, it goes back to the customer and they may proceed with payment. That's essentially when electronic permitting would improve the process. Currently, what is happening after the payment happens, our system generates weekly mail outs. And again, our staff needs to process them and also quality check them, because there can always be some issues with it. There are various, and I'm happy to talk about that if anyone is interested. But making this a little bit short, at that point, as soon as it has been quality checked, it goes to the print shop. The print shop has its own process of quality checking and cleaning up the address space based on their system. Then they print and stuff the envelopes for shipping, and then it goes to USPS and hopefully it gets delivered, but that's also an aspect I will be talking about. And then it takes some time for the materials to arrive at the applicant's home. Now, with electronic permitting, after someone has paid, that whole process of creating the mail out lists, print shop, mailing, that all would fall away. The payment happens, and as soon as it happens, the permit would be valid and eligible for use. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what happened over the last few years, because when we shifted in 2022 from the old vendor to the new vendor of the software, we experienced quite a lot of issues. And it was not just software related, but there were quite a few issues in the first and second year. It took us about 2 years to get it to a stable process. But we also experienced continued issues of mailing and printing problems. And while we have made great strides to improve the process, and I would say over the last 2 years, it has been fairly stable, there's still a group of people who continuously experience issues with receiving the mails. So in 2024, for example, we had only just for lost mail replacements request of 207 applicants. And we have all kinds of replacement requests, but that was just for lost mail. So we did send out a feedback form to get a little bit more insight into the experiences and potential solutions, what people would be looking for in the future. So what we heard is that 52% of the ones who replied did not just experience the loss of mail, but also delays in mail. And there can be different perceptions of what constitutes a long time to wait for permits, but it can take a few weeks. And usually we tell people if it doesn't arrive within like 5 to 6 weeks, they should contact us so we can resend the materials. We also hear that there is some issue with like 13% that experienced forgetting to display the permits, because we have different types. We have the decal, which can be attached to the bumper. And usually when they attach it, then it's there. It always is there, right? But with flex passes or visitor passes, they need to be displayed on the dashboard. So one needs to remember to do that in the first instance. But then also, if you drive around with a car, the materials may shift, and when you come back to parking, you may not realize it might have fallen down, and you may get ticketed. So furthermore, people also reported that materials could be stolen as well as damaged. So if you have it on the bumper and you have an accident, that can also happen quite frequently. 23% chose other and didn't necessarily specify what it was concerning, but we did hear a few opinions also on public, like customer feedback issues. So when it then comes to preferences for the future, the number one improvement option that people chose was renewal without re-entry of information. And that has nothing to do with electronic permitting. Really, it is about when you renew your permit for a vehicle, then you had to enter your VIN number, your plate number, state information, all these. We have already taken care of that as part of the current system. This was one of the only things that was possible for improvement for the things that are still outstanding. So that happens already. Now, when it comes to the next options that were runner-ups, instant fulfillment of permit materials, that is, with paper materials, it's just not possible, right? That whole process of printing and shipping, it just takes its time. And with electronic permitting, that could be addressed. It would definitely shorten the overall processing time. Improved parking enforcement, while the permits, like digital permits or electronic permits themselves, would not necessarily do something for enforcement in, just in terms of the process of getting the materials to customers. As soon as digital permits are in the system, PSAs can use technology to, for example, license plate readers to drive down a road, and they only would have to get out of the car if they get a ping if the license plate is not registered. Currently, they have to look out for the decals, and if they don't see the decal, either because there is none or depending on how the car is parked, they have to get out of the car and then find the decal or the other permit materials and then establish if someone is eligible or not. Furthermore, a few people did specifically mention digital permits. They would be looking for that. And then also flexible individual application periods. We could do that at the moment as well with paper applications, but it's much more feasible with electronic permits. And then also additional payment options was something that was chosen as an improvement. So I already mentioned most of this here. Instant fulfillment, prevent of loss, damage, theft of materials. You don't have to remember to display it. Camera-based enforcement. And then again, making year-round renewal process more feasible. And if we want to implement all those aspects, we need that option in the ordinance. Currently, it does only talk about paper materials. So when it then comes to the ordinance changes that we are proposing, it is not that we are taking or getting rid of the other options. They're still in the code. We would like to add on. And so what that would look like in this case, for example, we're not changing any pricing or any permit options except for electronic visitor pass, because currently we only sell them in a book format. And in electronic versions, you don't need any books. You would just go by the number of days that someone would require. In addition, we need to add the electronic phrase wherever we also refer to paper. So for example, requirement to surrender paper materials if someone moves away also requires someone to, in theory, surrender electronic permits. Now, we all know you cannot really surrender them, but it allows us to cancel them out if someone left an address. In addition, option of electronic digital registration needs to count as a proof of being a permit holder for enforcement purposes. And then the next two are not related to electronic permitting, but we do want to also tackle them at this point in time. We want to add the option to expand the income discount that we currently offer to county programs. We only have state and federal, but we want the flexibility in case it comes to that. And then furthermore, we also would like to change the permit validity period. So at the moment, a permit is always only eligible until the end of the program year, which is always June 30th. So if you come in and apply in December, your permit will still only count until June 30th, right? So if we have more ongoing renewal, then that would also allow us to shift a little bit the eligibility and validity when it comes to making changes to the program. I mentioned in 2022, we had all these issues with software, and it caused delays in when people would receive a permit. So if we had the opportunity to make their current permits longer valid, that would have improved a lot of heartache for many people, and not just us. And then we just need to clarify a few things also and correct the code. So we would clarify again, we have display of physical permit or registration of permits when it comes to fining. Also, when you stay in a metered space and it is in an RPP zone, you need to display a permit to not pay the meter. Same thing for time limited spaces. If you have a permit, you don't have to stay in that time limit. And the last one, again, is just a clarification. The code currently says it needs to be in lieu of the first vehicle-specific permit. We just want to make it more general. It can be one of the vehicle-specific permits. So when it then comes to the transition process, I do want to mention that we have a group of customers, about 8% of our customer base, that have been doing everything in paper or in person. They apply on a paper form, they come in and pay in cash or mail in checks. And we do want to continue providing options for those customer base. Now, while we hope to also be able to shift and incentivize some of them to shift to the electronic system, it's not possible. We know it's not possible for everyone. So we will continue, as we do now, to send out paper applications by request. We also will continue the same way as we have it now, in-person service. Nothing will change on that front. And we will provide phone support. So the only thing that would change for every customer would just they wouldn't have permit materials in their hand to display on or in their car. And then for the transition overall, we would provide customer support in various options. We would, of course, do various mail out notifications. We probably would have like an upfront mail out to just inform everyone what's changing, when it is changing. If it should go hand in hand with a continuous renewal process and not the annual one as we have it currently, we might want to also do staggered notifications based on who is able to apply at what point in time. And then we provide just different tools for training, in-person sessions, trainings by request. And I already mentioned we might be spreading out also the renewal window because we might be staggering the application period. And we are considering potentially pausing enforcement. Again, currently the application window ends at June 30th every year, and then usually enforcement starts in July. Depending on how it goes, we would be pausing enforcement until everyone is set up with the new system. So again, request to advertise would be in front of the board November 15th. We would be hoping to be as an action item at the board agenda December 13th. That would mean the ordinance would go into effect in January, and hopefully then the electronic permitting would become an option end of fiscal year 26 into 2027. And that concludes my presentation. If anyone has any questions, feel free to visit our website or contact any of those contacts that you can see here or on our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Vice Chair Furman.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. The one question I had was, what enforcement will be involved on the requirement to surrender electronic materials when the resident status for eligibility changes?
So enforcement is not in the first line involved. Usually how it happens is that we are being contacted by the next person who moves in. If we're lucky, the person who moves away contacts us when they move, but in most instances, that is not the case. So the new person who moves in contacts us and requests the permits. And at that point, we cancel out the old permit, which means if the person who moved away chooses to come back into that RPP zone, their license plate would not show up in the system anymore. And at that point, when enforcement would come, the license plate wouldn't show in the system anymore, and they would get a ticket if they didn't get a visitor pass.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Commissioner Flores.
A couple of weeks ago, we saw a widespread AWS outage that took a lot of government services offline. What would our redundancy considerations be here if there were to be a widespread outage?
So if there is a widespread outage, that would even impact the system as we currently have as well. And as I remember, we did have a few issues as well with accessing the software system that we currently have. And so that wouldn't really change with electronic permitting. That's just a matter of the overall redundancy that we created Arlington County. Usually what we do in those instances is we take note, if it's not crunch time, which is from April to June, that is always a little bit of a different situation. But if it is during a time as it is now, where we just have sporadic applications, we usually take them in, we make notes of them and come back to them as soon as it has been fixed. Usually these outages don't take like weeks and weeks. So we would be coming back to the applicant. Either they can then fill out also still paper applications if they wanted to. They can always come in person. We have temporary permits that we can still issue if that is needed.
Okay, thank you so much.
Commissioner Wayne, tell me.
You have a couple of questions. First, thank you for the presentation. It's interesting that this is coming forward. Is this, it's going to be license plate based, so there's not going to be like an Easy Pass transponder or stickers or anything. Those are all going to be gone?
Yeah, we don't have Easy Pass at the moment for RPP. Oh, we never had it for RPP. That was for meters. And no, we don't have Easy Pass anymore. And even if you think about the different options for RPP that we have at the moment, we have, for example, Flex Pass and Visitor Pass, which currently do not require license plates. But that would change going forward. So the option of Flex Pass wouldn't necessarily even exist anymore because you do have flexibility just in the system itself. For example, if a household is eligible for 2 permits, at the moment, what they could do, if they wanted to be flexible, they can get 1 decal and 1 Flex Pass and would use the Flex Pass to be flexible among different cars. If you have a registered permit, you are flexible in that you can assign a license plate every day, even by the hour. You can go into the system and change the license plate, but it will require it also for your visitors. Yes.
Okay, so that means that in the neighborhoods, no one who lives there can tell who is in fact registered or not. That all those cars, the only people that can tell are county enforcement officers. Is that right?
That is correct based on permit materials. However, we are thinking about, because we've seen it in other jurisdictions, some of them offer an online website where customers like the public can type in a license plate that they see, and it shows if it has a registration or not. So we are exploring that as an option to offer for our customers. I would
strongly urge you to do that because a lot of the neighborhoods, enforcement, frankly, is pretty spotty. There are neighborhoods who constantly complain that there are people parking in the area and they don't get tickets. And that's contrary to what the RPP purpose is. If they can't even tell anymore whether a car, or they have to constantly go online to find out, that helps a bit. But this is like having to go online for every single thing. That's going to be very frustrating for people to just, because right now with my Flex Pass, somebody stops by, I can just, oh, here, take this while you're parked here for the next, half an hour. Having to go online and go through passwords and that sort of thing really drives people totally up the wall. I'm just letting you know now that there's going to be a lot of dissatisfaction by having to do every single thing online. And even if you can change it every 10 minutes, that's fine. But it means going online every 10 minutes. And that is not something people enjoy doing. Just passing that along.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I'm actually pretty supportive of this. It provides another option for people. A lot of transit solutions don't require technology, but this is one where you can kind of increase enforcement by the county in the way that you have enforcement for cars that are parked on the street but are not registered with the county or paying the tax with the county. So from what I understand, this will be the same system. The little county card would drive through with a license plate reader, and then you will get a ticket later if you didn't have the vehicle registered. So I think that's a way of kind of scaling up enforcement, where you can cover more area quickly without the enforcement officer going and looking, did the sign fall down? Is it on the dashboard? Maybe it's on the seat or something like that. So
I absolutely agree with you,
yeah.
because that's going to be the key to the success of this program. Yeah. If there is increased enforcement and effective enforcement, the complaints will go way, way down.
Yes.
But if there is not that concomitant increase in enforcement, you're going to have a lot of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Commissioner Thea, please jump in.
Yeah, actually, I did think of one question regarding that automated enforcement with the license plate readers. Is that technology included in this request authorization, or is that going to be separate, meaning that this request authorization is really just for the back-end payment processing aspect of this digitization?
It is not. Yeah, thank you for your question. It is not part of this request because this is just generally to allow it as part of the ordinance. But we are in the process of actually also procuring. We have received a quote for extra technology, and it will be part of the process, but not of the request today.
Well, what do you mean by extra technology?
Oh, extra license plate readers. For
more
the
license plate readers?
have.
Okay, yeah. To increase enforcement. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, and I guess
yes,
following
please.
up on that, I guess the request for proposal then that's out now for the license plate readers technology. How specific is that? Is this automated technology going to be, I guess, mounted to the vehicles and automatically run, like automatically scan license plates and check, verify them against the database as the county employee is driving along streets? Or will it be more of a manual process where the staff member will have to, or the employee will have to like manually point some sort of device that is handheld at a license plate to read it? Or how specific is this technology requirement so far?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And we don't have to put out a request for proposal or even a quote. We have received the quote as part of enforcement already having a contract with a company that has provided technology to them already. I think they have 2 or 3 cars at the moment that have that technology already installed, so it will be on the car itself. It's also on the handheld device in case the PSA cannot read the license plate or there's an issue with the system, to then also do it with a handheld device. But yes, it will be in the car. And I believe we're currently planning to outfit all 9 PSA vehicles that are currently part of the fleet. So yes, that would be that.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Seeing no further questions or comments, could we please get the motion up on the screen so that we can vote on it? What?
Marietta, are you putting the motion up on the screen or shall I?
Oh, is it the second slide that I provided?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I can do that. Okay. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. I'm already in the next presentation. One sec. Here we go.
Okay. Yeah, is that the motion? Yeah. Are we doing this CM recommendation? Is that the one we're going to read? All right, I'll just read it from the staff report. All right. Well, first, can I get a motion to vote? Seconded motion.
Seconded.
Okay. All right. I'm going to read the motion. Recommend to adopt a resolution, attachment 8, to authorize advertising of a public hearing at the December 13th, 2025 County Board meeting to consider adoption of an ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify Chapter 14.2, parentheses, motor vehicles and traffic, Article 8, parentheses, residential parking program, Sections 14.2 to 99, authority to administer RPP program, 14.2 to 100, zone boundaries, 14.2 to 101, permit eligibility, 14.2 to 102, permit fees, 14.2 to 103, proof of eligibility, 14.2 to 104, continuation of metered or paid parking restrictions on parking spaces newly subject to RPP restrictions, and 14.2 to 106, enforcement of penalties of the Arlington County Code to accommodate electronic residential permit parking program permits. Okay, a lot of P's in the end. All right, I think I'm gonna start taking votes. Commissioner Flores.
Aye.
Vice Chair Furman.
Aye.
Commissioner Hussain.
Aye.
Commissioner Lane, tell me.
Aye.
I vote aye. And Commissioner Theo.
Aye.
I believe that's all we have for tonight. Oh, Commissioner Coleman is here virtually.
Yep. Aye.
All right, great. Thank you for joining us. All right. The resolution passes with a vote of 7 in favor. All right. Thank you. And I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
And Marietta,
All right.
that would be you too.
Yep, that's still me. So here we go. All right, next item is about the performance parking pilot project. And this is just an informational item. So here we go. We are, as part of this presentation, at the end of it, I would ask you for your input on the project itself, but also specifically on what you would like to see coming out of this pilot. And the presentation will give a quick overview of the project, the data findings so far, and then again, also talking about the ordinance change topics we are considering, but it's still very much open for input. So any thoughts you might have on those topics are very welcome. So as a reminder, the performance parking project has its main purpose to make metered parking spaces more available more often. We focused our pilot phase on the 2 metro corridors, Roslyn-Ballston and the Richmond Highway Corridor. And as you all know, with search for parking come a lot of different negative impacts. The cruising generates noise pollution, additional emissions, erratic behavior, and there's of course also the concern generally that if an area is very high in demand and parking is difficult to find, people may choose to go somewhere else. So in terms of project timeline, we had started implementing this project in 2022. Since then, we have installed all the sensors in most of the metered spaces in those 2 corridors. And we had 6 price changes where we changed the prices either up or down based on performance, meaning demand on the street. And now, as you can see, fall 2025, we are in the state of data analysis and looking for ordinance updates because the ordinance that's currently in place has a sunset date and will come to an end. As part of this project, we have done a lot of different phases of engagement with different focus topics depending on what was going on, like sensor installation or price changes. And to be a little bit more specific, we had the regular stuff going on. We had a website, we had some feedback forms. In addition, we did a lot with signage. Aside from the dynamic signs, which I also will be talking about, we had signs at intersections, in the sidewalk. We had them on the meters themselves. We did some flyering in specific areas where we specifically increased the prices to make people aware that there are options available in those areas. We also had various in-person interactions in pop-up events, open houses. We did outreach to the businesses and specifically also did parking intercepts because we wanted to engage with people at the moment when they had a parking experience. And aside from those meetings, I also want to mention the Code the Curb event because that was a little bit special. We had reached out to the Northeastern University and collaborated with them for an event where people could use the open API and come up with their own ideas of what to do with parking data. So that was also very informative. So what we are doing with the data so far, we have created different tools, and I would like to mention two tools that I personally, in general, we find most helpful. We have a variety of different tools available that you can access on our website. You see a screenshot of the website on the left side. The middle is one that I do want to emphasize on because it has two parts of it. So this is ExactNav. It's an app from 11x, which is available on Apple Store as well as Google Store. And this app provides you information about availability of spaces. Currently, as you can see here, it is done with coloring as well as with the numbers. In the future, and when I say future, it's in the next 1 or 2 weeks, this will change a little bit. And I do have a screenshot later on that I want to show where it will actually show the price as well. Now, you currently have to click on it to then see the price. So it's less convenient. And we thought that was a no-brainer. So that will change soon. And then in addition, it doesn't just show availability, it also navigates you to the spot. So you can click on it, and as soon as you hit navigation, it changes to Google Maps, and everyone is familiar with Google Maps, and the experience would be the same, that would be routed to that location that you need to get to. On the right-hand side, we have a meter rate by location interactive map. That is for people who don't want to use apps, but they do want to get a feeling for what an area generally offers at what point in time. If I have, for example, a doctor's appointment or I'm meeting up with someone and I know I'm going at a specific time, I can look at the map, just get a general idea of where the cheaper parking is or the more expensive parking to avoid that, and then do my plan. I did mention dynamic signs, so we have installed by now 10 signs in the public right-of-way. We have gone through different iterations of changing the formatting based on public input, and it is improving as we go along. I don't think we're done yet, but it came a long way. And we are currently in the process of relocating 3 of those because they're in a location where it's not really user-friendly. So that is being done, and we're constantly still collecting feedback on those as well. I talked about different pricing. So currently what we have in the right-of-way is a variety between 75 cents and $4.75. And what you see here is a distribution of prices by space. And this is not 100%. This is more than that because some spaces have more than one price in a day. So that space would show up multiple times in this chart. But you can see that generally speaking, like the mid-ranges of pricing is still the highest. And then it does taper out into the higher as well into the lower pricing. So what the data says, generally speaking, the demand has been fairly steady. We haven't seen a big shift. We do see seasonal trends emerging, but there are different reasons for why we believe we don't see a change yet. I will be talking about that. There's also a bit of a difference between what the public perceives their priorities are and what we see in demonstrated preferences, meaning the data. We do see generally that the awareness seems to be growing, that this is going on, that we have tools, but the usage hasn't really picked up, like people making use of the data. And still payment compliance remains really low. Still only about 60%, well, 60% do not pay, so about 40% pay. It's unaffected by price, the compliance. And we have a few ADA and RPP insights. So let's go right into the data. And I do want to point out that I switched a few slides to the additional ones because I want to focus on the main points and not take too much of your time, but we can talk about it later if you like. So here I wanted to specifically show the high demand areas. And the high demand ones are the ones where we increase the price. So we would have expected to especially see some changes here because that was our goal. We wanted to shift away the demand to low demand areas and had hoped to reduce the overall occupancy. But as you can see here, it is really, really steady. This is even more specific because even the high demand areas have different peak times. So there are times in the day when the prices are low, so we might not be shifting demand there. But even if we look at a time, and this is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., even if we look there, we do not really see a change in trend. So this is a box plot. It's a distribution of occupancy in these high demand areas versus regular spaces. So orange are the high priced areas and blue are the regular ones. So everything else essentially. And you can see the occupancy on the left side. So again, we have like mean and median. They still slightly fluctuate, but it's mainly seasonal. Again, we do not have statistical confidence at the moment that our project has been really influencing these these changes that we see. A lot of concern was around sessions. The idea was that if we increase prices, we are pushing people out of the area and they might be going somewhere else, right? Because if you think about occupancy, there could be one car just occupying the space. Compared to maybe before it was 4 or 5 cars that had the same occupancy. So we would not necessarily see it in the occupancy. But even if we look at sessions, again, we see month by month or season to season differences. Specifically, I want to point out the one in January, February, where sessions really dropped. And we all know we had the snow events there. So that has a huge impact. But then it crept up again and it has been, again, fairly steady. And I mentioned dwell time. Again, you can have high occupancy, but you don't serve a lot of people. But if you have high occupancy and short dwell times, that means we would serve a lot of customers. So our hope was, if we don't see changes in occupancy, maybe we're changing dwell time. But again, here, we haven't really seen a big change either. And to go a little bit more specific, when I talk about high serving zones, which is this specifically here, all the charts up focused on high serving blocks. That is high demand plus lower dwell time. So all of those are 45 minutes or less dwell time. Even here, we don't see a big shift. And I do want to point out in the material that I previously had provided, we accidentally had switched the regular and high serving compliance chart down here. So we switched that back and corrected that. I do want to point that out. So it is as expected. If you have a shorter dwell time, and that didn't really surprise us, then so high serving, again, shorter dwell time, usually people pay even a little bit less. They're even less compliant because they risk it, right? They jump in, they get a coffee or whatever they need quickly, and they're hoping not to get ticketed. That's our assumption. That's why we also see even lower compliance in those spaces specifically. But this chart talks or has as a header latent demand, and that brings me to a topic that even if we get to a point where we can factor out seasonality, and we're not quite there yet, we don't have enough data to factor the seasons out yet, but if we get there and we should get a closer look at maybe what our project is really impacting, maybe latent demand can be one of the reasons why we're not shifting behavior. I did mention compliance already. If compliance is low, we're changing prices. If people don't pay, they're not impacted by price changes, right? I also mentioned awareness. If they're not aware of it, they don't know that there are options. So they park because they don't know that there are other options. But latent demand really means there's always so much coming after that even if we push people out of the high demand areas into other areas, or maybe into other modes, or even to completely other areas, that we still see so many people coming after that are willing to take the spot. That is latent demand in a nutshell. So that brings me then, it's closely interlinked with what people prioritize. And when we ask people at our different activities, the priorities come out pretty equal. You see, like it's about a third in terms of priority for what we offered as an option. Do you choose to be close? Do you want it to be easy to find? Or do you prefer it cheap, right? So it's a third about for each. And that brings us to that all our priorities change. They can change from day to day or even hour to hour. If I'm running late for a doctor's appointment, I probably will bite in the sour apple and say, I'm parking right here in the front of the doctor's office, even if it costs $4. But if I meet with friends and it's a nice day out, I might walk 5 minutes, and that's fine. And I'm able to actually look for options that are cheaper. So that again comes to what are my priorities at that point in time that also drive the decision if I park here or not. But generally speaking, and that was like a mistype before, it's 13.5 million parking sessions in metered hours during our parking pilot. We generally see that people still park in those areas. They're more willing, honestly, to pay than we actually think they would. And there are also apparently more people looking for parking than there are spaces because we don't see a shift. But again, there's low awareness of the options and there's low compliance, and we need to address this like really critically. But and on this, as a side note, 85% of the metro corridors are reachable within a 5-minute walk from the lowest price blocks. So the ones you see here in yellow are the blocks that are at any point in time $2 or less. And if you find those and make use of the data that we have, you can reach 85% within a 5-minute walk. But even areas like Clarendon, you see that's pretty gappy, right? Gappy. Even there, we have options. So we have an area with lower demand generally where the max rate is between $2 and $4. And then a really much high demand area, which has a max rate of $4 or above. And max rate means there are other times of the day when that rate can be much lower. So if you have a choice to make an appointment at a certain time and pricing is a concern, you can also make use of the data and figure out what would be a good time for you to make an appointment if you have that flexibility. I did mention we have some ADA, we focus also on ADA spaces, not as part of performance parking. I want to make that very clear. We did not change pricing in ADA spaces based on performance. We did change some ADA prices on blocks where we decreased other spaces because it didn't make sense for us to charge more for ADA spaces. So we adjusted them so that they're all equal. But the max rate for ADA spaces in any area is $175, and that has always been the case. So generally what we see is that ADA spaces are a little bit less often used than regular spaces. And interestingly, we do with the data now, it's fantastic because we now can see hotspots that gives us an indication of if it's worthwhile looking into. Just because something has like a high occupancy, that doesn't necessarily mean it's misused. But if you combine that with dwell time, for example, and you look into, wow, this location at these certain times has an average dwell time of below 5 minutes in a space that is meant for people with disabilities. And I'm aware not everyone has a physical disability, but on average, that would mean pretty much every parker who parks there can go about their business within 5 minutes or less. That is just really unlikely. So it gives us the opportunity to find that out, to work with enforcement, and to really target those areas that are in need because they experience misuse. And that was one of the major priorities that people of the ADA, the customers of the ADA community cited as they want to see an improvement, is enforcement. Also, RPP Street, we did keep an eye on those. We did a survey throughout the price change period. And generally speaking, the quintessence is we haven't seen spillover into those areas. We have a few, like the ones here in North Nelson, North Irving Street, that have already started at like a really, really high occupancy. And then we did also see them creeping up sometimes. But if you see where they lie, like we did mark the ones that had a price increase, so you can see where they are. They're not even in a location where we increased the price, except for North Tazewell. And what we found when we look at the streets specifically is usually they have a lower capacity than other streets. And when I say that, I mean, some blocks have, for example, 10 or 15 spaces available. They fill up less quickly than if you have a block with 5 or 7 spaces. So that's usually what we see in reason for high occupancy on those blocks. So again, for next steps, we will be requesting to advertise probably at the December board meeting. My colleague Melissa McMahon will come back to the TC to request an action then to support this advertisement. And then we are planning on doing an action at the next boarding meeting in probably January, February. And generally speaking, the topic would be that we want to continue the performance-based management approach. And if we talk a little bit more specifically, again, I mentioned we have currently a sunset date. We want to remove that. We want to continue beyond that. And we have a restriction to the 2 metro corridors. We would like to expand it throughout the county to wherever we have metered spaces. And then we also currently have a reference to a maximum frequency of rate changes, which is not more frequently than every 3 months. Now, honestly, if that stays in, it's fine. We're not really expecting to do it much more often than once or twice a year. It's just a lot of work on the one hand, but also we do want to keep it as understandable as possible for the public, like what's going on and where it's going on. If we want to improve awareness, I don't think the way to go about it would be doing a price change more frequently. And then increases to the maximum possible rate per hour. Currently, we have a cap at $5. You saw that the highest rate we currently have is $4.75. Again, the focus really from our perspective is not on price changes. It is on awareness building and enforcement. But if we start seeing shifts there, we do need the flexibility, then also bring pricing as a tool into the mix again. And then we just want to do some routine reporting. We want to be transparent of what's going on and how. I mentioned all these options, like all these aspects already, the price options, awareness, compliance, and we will be doing that also through improving all the tools that we currently have available. And I also want to mention that we are struggling at the moment to think about how we can make it even easier for users that are not really tech savvy or don't want to use tech as much, right? So there was a suggestion from a colleague that was thinking about, well, maybe we can do something with coloring or patterns that people, before they even enter into a blog, if we, for example, would put something on signs or around poles, that gives them a cue of like, oh, this is a high-priced blog. Maybe I don't want to go there. So we're still thinking about that, and we haven't quite figured it out yet. But it would need to be something that is flexible. It cannot be like a hard installation, on the one hand for cost reasons, but also we need to be flexible in case we're changing the prices. So again, that brings me to the end of this presentation, and I'm very keen on hearing any thoughts you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Furman.
Hi, thank you. I have a few questions. The first one is around the average occupancy. It's frequently in the mid 70% range. Do we have a goal for what we're looking for the average occupancy percentage overall to be, or within each one of the price change phases? What do we want these numbers to be?
Yeah, so we had 2 different thresholds. We would lower prices in blocks that were 40% or lower, and we would increase prices if it was 80% or higher. So anything really that would go below, like in the high demand areas, this is what we're looking for. If it would go below 80%, not on average, right? Like, because average always means like there are some blocks that are much, much higher. So I see what you're saying, because we're in the 70s here. What are we looking for? We would very likely, and then let me actually go to the next slide, because that is this a little bit more specific to the peak times. So here we're much closer to the 80 range. We would like to get away from the 80% threshold. So if we would see like 70 or 60, I think that would be fantastic. But anything really lower than what we're currently seeing would already be great. So if it could be around 70 on average in during peak times when we actually increase the rates, that would be fantastic.
Okay, thank you. The next one's around enforcement. So I know this is an ongoing concern for the county. The Arlington police are struggling to recruit sufficiently to staff enough enforcement officers. We've heard about this not just in parking, but in traffic violations as well. What are we doing to improve compliance and enforcement? Are there options being discussed within the parking pilot program? What are the options on the table to help in that area?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really tricky, as you heard probably multiple times. I do want to point to this slide here, which I had added as additional information. You can see here, for example, that you probably are aware that police was able to staff up, and they're currently still training the new people that came on board. And then we also talked already about the license plate recognition technology that we are procuring to outfit all the PSA vehicles. PSA, for anyone who's not familiar, a public service aid. And so when you see here in the last few months, and especially in August and September, we see it creeping up in terms of compliance. And when we look at the citation data, that has really jumped up. So we do see it's going in the direction. Is it a trend yet? I'm not sure, but it's going in the direction. But overall, yes, it will need staffing. It will need a combination effort between us having the data, the enforcement teams making use of the data in the most efficient way. And we have tried different versions of it. It wasn't quite as successful because when we started it last year, they were just really understaffed when it came to enforcement. So we didn't quite see the impact that we would like to see, but we had like target areas based on where we saw the highest enforcement. So making use of the data that we have, I think will really make a big difference as soon as police and enforcement is at a point that they can make use of it. And I think they're getting there. We are starting to see something happening. So I'm keen to see what happens with the new technology, honestly.
Thank you. And then the last question I had is concerning technology. Is there any possibility to sync some of what we are collecting into the Park Mobile app? Because if we could include either price and or space availability within that app, you'd be reaching paying customers within the technology space they already need to visit to pay in order to occupy the space. I love the use of the new app for availability. I've used the website as well for looking at availability, even just as a curiosity at times of just seeing kind of what is out there. But I'm just curious, is there anything we can do to bring this to what is already our established payment app?
Yeah, you're hitting a little bit of a pain point right there. I'm not sure if you were available. We had an availability layer in Park Mobile. They have since turned that off, unfortunately. We've done everything we could on our end to push them not to do so, but they were bought up with someone else. They merged with someone else, and we are not quite sure what it will take going forward. However, on our end, what we are doing is we are looking into a new procurement possibility to open it up to more payment vendors that, and I'm not saying that there's necessarily the goal to have more payment apps, right? We are hoping to kind of like provide different options that can be merged through one platform. That would be the ideal case scenario in our mind. So we're exploring that at the moment, and then make as part of that procurement the feeding of this data into this new app or into the new vendor that would be providing the service a condition. So that is one aspect. We also have gotten feedback from the public generally that they said, why can you not make it part of the Google experience, right? And we have tried. We reached out to Google, like the really big ones. They're not concerned with like small locational pilot projects. Maybe it comes in the future. We're still looking out, but we definitely hit a barrier there to make it part of an existing experience that many people use. But yes, so I think the procurement vehicle we are currently looking into to procure payment vendors and make that a condition, that is something we're exploring.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't often have to make use of the apps. I didn't realize that Park Mobile had that at one point and now no longer does, but thank you for walking me through that disappointment. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Flores.
My question was stolen by Commissioner Furman on his second question, but I do have a follow-up to that. Do we have any awareness as to the compliance of parking tickets in other areas, like in the city of Alexandria or in DC?
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I believe 2 days ago, enforcement actually presented on their enforcement pilot that they have in Alexandria. And they did actually hire a contractor to do part of the enforcement topic by topic area, essentially, right? So they focused, I believe, their vendor focused on parking specific ticketing, so that it freed up capacity for enforcement to go about other issues, let's put it that way, and requests. So it's interesting because when I saw they had slides on increase in citations, they had slides in increase in transactions, which is a number of payments. But in the end, and they improved, like they did show that. But it's difficult to say what the actual impact was. And they did mention that they cannot really make 100% correlation to compliance because they don't have the actual data. And that's a problem in many jurisdictions. They have transaction data and they have citation data, but what it actually means in terms of compliance is always guesswork because they oftentimes do not have the sensor data. But how it currently looks like, for example, in DC, because they have performance-based areas, I believe they have 3 by now. I would have to look into that. I'm not sure how the enforcement currently looks like. I do know that after the first period, they did say that also occupancy improved, right? But when you look into actually what happened is they worked together with the government entities that had the government vehicles on the street in a third of that area and worked with them to push it out to streets that have been restricted to those cars. And so they freed up space. And so it's always a question of how this data is gathered, really. But yeah.
So the reason for my question is when we think about the fiscal responsibility of the county board's budget and considerations for sunsetting a project like this, if the money is more worthwhile to be spent on another role that could be dedicated towards enforcement, my personal opinion would be that it be relocated towards there. I think this is a really wonderful tool for data collection, but I also think this lack of enforcement is still concerning since we're still at 40%. So yeah, not really a question, just a comment.
Yeah, and that actually raises something else in my mind, because what we also have been discussing is if we have an improved enforcement technology, which would allow maybe also at some point automated ticketing, right? Which I believe DC, for example, has for red light, and I think we do that too. But in terms of parking, we don't have that yet. But if we should ever come to that and that improves efficiency, we were thinking also maybe it's not so much about the punitive approach to having people go out and ticket, because that comes also with the experience that public service aides have every day on the street, right? It's not a pleasurable experience overall. And that's why it also makes it so hard for police to hire new people and keep them in the job and in the position. If there is an opportunity to take more of an educational approach, because when we reached out and we had these intercepts and we showed people the tools, we made them aware, there were often these aha moments. He's like, oh my God, that is so great, I will do that, right? Will this improve compliance? I don't know, right? But it might be something we want to also test in an area, right? And because we have the data with citation as well as the session data, that would be something we could target and then really analyze and see how that would work out. So yeah, it's an interesting topic for sure. And I am making notes of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hussain.
Yeah, great presentation. I have one question. Earlier in the presentation, you talked about how with the digital parking availability signs, I've seen some of them around the county, and I was wondering, I think you mentioned that you were that y'all were thinking of moving some of them, because I think I wonder if you could maybe talk more about that and maybe how what your thinking is on how those electronic signs can maybe, what are the ways that can improve to improve people's awareness? Because I've seen the signs, I think it's that kind of digital wayfinding it can have a lot of value in increasing people's awareness towards cheaper areas to park. So I'm curious to know like what went really well with these digital signs, what didn't go so well, and what you're thinking of the future is.
Yeah. So the reason why we are specifically relocating 3 of the signs at the moment is purely for visibility purposes. Like if I talk, for example, about the map that we see right here, close to Clarendon on Highland Street, when you actually drive up Clarendon, Wilson Boulevard, the sign becomes visible for one thing because of trees, but also because the bulb out of the street and how the street is located in terms of traffic flow, the direction drivers look at is actually not directed towards the sign. So you are almost in the intersection until you even notice there is a sign, even if you even notice, depending on what you're looking for, how distracted you are. So most of them, all 3 at the moment, are really for visibility purposes, really thinking about how the driver drives, experiences the street, and then having the sign where it makes the most sense for the view. Because what we did before when we made all the decisions, we're very limited when it comes to locations of traffic signs because it has to have certain conditions of cabling, electronic access, and the age of a traffic sign or signal, it comes into play as well. So we sometimes made a decision based on what we heard was the most efficient in terms of infrastructure, but not necessarily in its experience. So that's what we're doing in relocation. But when we then also talk about reformatting, for example, right, we started out with much more information. So we have more and more reduced it. We do more with symbology now. So as you can see here, we just put up the P, right? We don't show the number of parking spaces and all these things anymore because it's not really important. You need to know, is there parking or is there not? So if something becomes full, it will say full. And that's all it says. It will not even show a price anymore. It just says full, don't go there. But if it is available, it has the P. And then usually when you see a sign the first time, it takes a little bit to get used to it. So it's not that we assumed it would be right away helpful. People need to process of what the meaning is of these symbols and the information. But as soon as they understand and they get familiar with an area, then I think it will be very helpful. But we might not even be there yet in terms of what's the most efficient. So we are still, and if you have any ideas, we have an ear for that.
Actually, if you don't mind me jumping in first, Commissioner Theo. Yeah. For a potential idea, have you experimented, like, let's say, look at the sign that's on the picture now.
Yeah.
People that live in Arlington will know where 13th Street is, or people at least familiar with that neighborhood. Not everyone in Arlington, but people from out of town definitely will not. It's kind of cramped, but I was wondering if there could be some distance notification that could, because from the data you collected, a third of the people prioritize proximity. And so that could be the price and the distance could be something that could inform people better. I mean, obviously it would be kind of hard when you have Highland Street written out there. It takes up a lot of space.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could play around with the presentation of the information to include potential distance.
Yeah, that's interesting. Distance was definitely not something we previously even considered. What we have done is specifically focus on the streets that are right there. So for example, where this street is located, it's like, okay, you take a turn here or you take the next one. So
okay.
I understand what you mean. Like they might not know that 13th Street will be the next one, right?
So yeah.
And I do believe we have like 1 or 2 locations where we point in this direction and it's actually a way off. So having distance, it's a consideration. We can look into that. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Thea, please.
Yes, I had a couple of questions. Just getting back to my notes here. One, I was wondering, could you go back, or could you explain how the parking sessions are measured? for each of the spaces, and also how granular those measurements are. Is it just measuring one car, if any car parks in that space during that hour, sort of a binary yes or no, or is it down to a more granular time measurement of like every 15 minutes or 5 minutes or something like that?
Mm-hmm. It
And
actually
just-
doesn't come down to time at all. It is purely when an activity happens. So the sensor is registered when a metallic object comes in and leaves. So a session is defined by something starting. So you have a car coming in, it starts. As soon as it leaves, it registers. And as soon as the next car comes in, it has the next session registered. Which actually brings me to a point that we figured out just 2 weeks ago. We have a few locations where we determined outliers as part of our analysis, and we were like, what's going on? And so you all probably are familiar with Restaurant Row, 21st Street. And what's happening there is we have these two spaces going towards, I believe it's Eats. And right after these spaces, a traffic lane starts to organize itself for the right turn movement. And so if no car is parked in those parking spaces, people are actually driving over the parking spaces, and the sensors register it as a session because people are just driving over. And we had these counts for sessions with like not even a second of a stay sometimes, right? So we determined these outliers. But yes, that's how the sensors are actually registering sessions.
And also, I guess my second thing isn't so much a question, more maybe general, but I'm very interested in the information presentation aspect that you were talking about earlier. Like, how do we, the county, present this information, especially, rate changes, availability of lower rates nearby, and just of the performance parking program in general, to the public. And I mean, I guess if this is going into any notes, things that I've noticed when I'm out and about, and the occasional times that I need to use the metered parking spaces, is with the Park Mobile brand, or the Park Mobile signage specifically on like the payment boxes and some of the signage around these metered spaces. I noticed that the Park Mobile signage, it has a QR code, but the QR code just goes to like downloading the app, whereas it would be very convenient if there was a customized QR code for each parking zone, that a person could then just pull up, park, scan a QR code that's posted on signage right there by the parking spot. That would not only open up the Park Mobile app, but would also go ahead and fill out or tell it what zone, I think it's like a 5-digit code typically, that you're parking in. And I'm sure the Park Mobile app has APIs to handle this on their end. I mean, I think every app would have some sort of API process to where you could encode that into a URI for a QR code. But that would be an excellent like ease of use thing, because pulling into a spot, having to manually pull up the Park Mobile app, then wait a few seconds for it to load, and then punch in the 5-digit code for whatever zone that you're parked in. And this is probably after looking around, maybe a little confused, like trying to find the signage that says what zone you're in. Just having that QR code plastered right there would be very convenient. And then, of course, if you're
May I ask a question? Because I recently had a training session at the 55 plus community for our tools, and what they reported were issues with the Park Mobile app. And then when I worked with them, the ones that had downloaded the new version of Park Mobile had actually the zone right there. So when they opened, it would show where you are, and it shows exactly the zone that you are in. Is that not your experience? And I'm wondering if that has to do with the old or the new version, because I believe Park Mobile has somewhat taken care of that. Now, I don't know how much that actually auto-populates, but I believe they just click that zone and it would just go from there.
So I am mostly familiar, I guess, with an older version, or at least about a year, maybe 9 months ago is the most recent time that I've used it. But so that very well could be a new versus old issue. Also, I think I'm going to guess that the Park mobile app then probably pulls from GPS and makes a best guess on what zone.
Yeah, and that's a big issue because we have sometimes like ADA spaces are oftentimes located right next to regular spaces. And we have issues with that all the time, that it actually populates the wrong zone. So we haven't quite figured that one out either. Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine that with, relying on just GPS to sort of guess what zone you're in, that could cause some problems because some of the zones, like around Clarendon, for example, you have some price differences on different zones, and they're literally just around the corner from each other. I mean, you go like, 15, 20 steps around a block to the other side, there's like side street, and it's a different rate, and GPS may not necessarily pick that up properly.
Yeah.
So I do think relying on some, I'm going to say old school QR codes, even though they only really became popular in the past 5 years, but
Right.
and I know it's a material cost then, but I think ultimately it would be worthwhile in making this easier to use and more convenient for people to adopt.
That's
Agree.
not
Yeah.
a bad idea. I used Park Mobile to park here, and there are in the courthouse plaza parking lot, there's 3 or 4 different like numbers in just one parking lot, and the geographical. So if I'm not mistaken, our satellite GPS pointing system still limits us to a 6-meter circle. I think we might have gotten it down to 3 meters, but that's still like
that's also relying on the best technology.
Yeah. Exactly. And so today I had issues parking where it kept picking up a different zone. So we're still seeing that as an issue. And when you're thinking about like different parking zones and cost, the QR code isn't a bad idea.
And I guess on a related note to this information presentation aspect, if we're really wanting to get the public more aware of the performance parking program and really ramp it up, it may be worthwhile for the county to really be aggressive in its physical signage. I know we do post this as like a sticker on the side of the payment boxes for the various zones and a few other things, and we do like the temporary yard signs posted around. But I mean, it may very well be worthwhile for the county to just set aside and be set aside a chunk of money and be very aggressive for say 2 years on permanent signage that would be posted up in every zone, perhaps even just about every parking spot having some sort of post or a little permanent signage, just to really drill it in for a year or 2.
Thank you.
But thank you. Great presentation. Really looking forward to this project.
I have one question that is kind of related to this, but outside of the scope of your study. I was wondering if your team is looking at potentially any means to price the curb. So I know some cities are doing pilots with this in terms of pickup and drop off pricing on the curb through camera enforcement. I believe Pittsburgh has done it. I think DC might be doing a pilot, and I'm wondering if Arlington is looking to potentially do that down the road, because
Yes.
that's a Oh, here we go. Future opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I did have this as additional information in case it came up, and here you go.
Yeah.
So yes, as part of the data, we have seen that just because we now have so much information about activity, that it would make it easier for us on the one hand to determine what management is the most appropriate for a curb. That's the one thing. And then in the next part, it would be looking at technology to make it possible then also to charge for it. And specifically, I think if something comes next, and we are thinking and going in that direction already, the one that we're most interested in is loading as well as short-term parking. We have usually what happened for now, because we focused on metered spaces, we only changed spaces when requests came in. And we have seen that as soon as we switch them over to short-term spaces, the overall usage, the dwell time does decrease. And that creates the challenge, because we do see in the compliance data that as soon as dwell time is reduced, people are even less likely to pay. So we need to come up with something that makes it really easy to pay in the first thing, and that is related to all the comments we just heard, right? How difficult it can be to even just pay. And then also to make it easy for us to know if someone comes into a space and what to do if they're not paying. So yeah, that's an interesting topic at the moment. It's really hot because a lot of people are or different jurisdictions are playing around with that. I don't think anyone has yet found the ideal solution, but there are a lot of good ideas out there, and we're keen on starting that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you very much, Marietta, for 2 very informative sessions tonight.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good evening. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we can go on to our final agenda item.
And I'll turn it over to Chairman Berman.
Good evening, everyone. So this is in relation to the Arlington Transportation's future homework assignment that we were asked to fill out on a gap analysis. A few of you have already written to me to provide some overall thoughts. We do not need to get deep into the weeds on this. I can let everybody know that I think a number of the other commissions, committees, our former chair, Chris Slatt, they have all done an excellent detailed job of walking through the established priority zones, both for bike and micromobility and transit, and introduced where there were gaps and pointing out very specific improvements to what I think was in that initial batch. That if you all looked at the maps that were in the email that I sent out, there were some clear areas that were just not covered. And so I wanted to basically open it up for discussion, that if anybody had any questions that they wanted to talk through, any specific points they wanted to get across, because I think, other than that, what we can basically do is if there's overall thoughts on goals, specific priorities that we want to press for, we can combine that all into a wrapped up commission submission to the working group, and then they can take that into consideration as they move into the next phase of public feedback, which is beginning shortly. So with that, I'll open it up to anyone who wants to chat through. Commissioner Thiel.
I was just going to say I did see the email come in a couple of days ago on Tuesday and took a brief look at it. I've not had the time to dive in depth, unfortunately. Fully admit that up front. But looking through it, I did have some very general questions, really just if my fellow commissioners here could help me understand what I'm looking at. That's the first big step.
Yeah, absolutely. If you looked at those maps, and I'm trying to join the Teams meeting now because I think this will be significantly easier if I pull up a visual here. So one moment.
So I do see the 3 slides at the end of the deck.
Yeah,
and I've looked at them, and I'm just trying to figure out what it is I'm supposed to be grasping.
It was a little bit confusing. I think the last one is probably the most meaningful and helpful of the options. This is not being cooperative with me joining on here. What that's demonstrating there is it's showing priority 2 versus priority 3, and in some cases not listing a third priority. This is because pedestrians are always the first priority, so that's consistent throughout. What they're trying to emphasize is then as the second priority and third priority allow for within the right of way, what are we prioritizing? Biking and micromobility or transit? Or are we not attempting to prioritize transit at all in a particular corridor and we're only focused on biking and micromobility, or vice versa. That map, that's the combined one, has some very glaring gaps on it. And I don't want to describe it as being like torn to shreds by the working group, but significant input came in that I'll try to show the version of that in a moment whenever this allows me to on here. So just a moment. But does that answer your question of what you're looking at in terms of?
Yeah, that helps. That gets me a good couple of steps in. Absolutely. And if I'm understanding this further, with that third slide specifically, we have each individual route, I guess for lack of a better word, a street, road, whatever, is the current state or what the staff is proposing as our like target? Is that it? Or is it like
it was the staff proposal of what would be in this case, and they tried to deconflict both bike and transit priority within the map, and then identify in instances where they're both in a particular right of way, which one is being listed as priority 2, which one's being listed as priority 3, and then in some instances identifying, Glebe is a good example where the vast majority of Glebe, especially South Glebe Road, has no bike priority. It is only listed as transit priority. I'm gonna try. Okay, I finally got my computer to stop being a pain.
So if I'm reading this, then let's take Washington, North Washington Boulevard around Westover, for example. This third slide, this third map, staff is then sort of proposing that it be a priority 2 transit, priority 3 bike route. Whereas if we're going east past North George Mason Drive, it drops down to just priority 2 transit, no priority for bike at all. And similarly, if we're going west past North Sycamore Street, if I'm reading this correctly then. Okay.
Correct. And I am, Ms. Obukoya, I am sending you a link that if we can open that to a particular slide, which I will get that for you in a moment, we can then take a look at what at least was suggested by some of the other committees and commissions, specifically the Bicycle Advisory Committee did a very extensive adding of proposed bike priorities of both level 2 and 3. So if you go to slide 5 of this one, hopefully this is the right link. No. No, is it the, it should be one that's 41 slides long. So I don't think it's this. Okay, yeah, so if we go to slide 5, so not section 5, but slide 5, page 5, thank you. Perfect. This gives you a sense of how detailed some of the other committees and commissions got, where you can see, they basically went road by road to identify where priority 2 bike would be, priority 3 bike would be, and a lot of these have already now been integrated into a yet to be finalized map that will be presented to the working group by the county staff. So I'm sharing this in part because this is what I was explaining of, like, we don't need to get too into the weeds. That's basically been done with this process. But I still wanted to offer the opportunity that if there's anything that you all are noticing, and I can send the cumulative total of these suggestions that were made by other commissions and committees, if any of them missed something, we can add to it, or if we just have a general sense that we want to impart. Commissioner Lynn, tell me, I felt like some of your thoughts that you shared with me kind of hit on that spirit of, it's not getting so much into the details of this particular right of way, but at a more high level, what you're trying to impart. So yeah, so anyway, that's that was the goal of this discussion, was just to bring everybody up to speed on where this process is at so far.
So I guess on your point of if we see any glaring omissions or things like that, to present to you, to email them to you directly, and then you'll pass them on to the task force?
Yes, I can add them to the next working group meeting. They're not meeting again till December, but I can send it to staff sooner so that it's incorporated into the final edition that they make.
And I just want to check my eyesight then to see if I'm missing something, both on the original slide 3 as presented in the deck, and also the combined slide that you're presenting, or the combined map that you're presenting here. Doesn't look like even staff originally presented Arlington Boulevard from, say, yeah, I guess then from Courthouse region down to where it bends into its longer north-south. It doesn't even look like that is a common, or that is planned for bike priority at all, even though there is a multi-use trail as it exists currently.
It's brown. I know it is not easy to identify. So yes, it's on there, but same problem happens if you look at the like, it's more noticeable with the W&OD trail and the 4 mile run trail. If you look at those, because they're next to each other, it kind of makes like a couple layers of spaghetti
formatting.
Yeah,
I thought the same thing, but when you zoom in, like to the maximum level, you can see the brown.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think that hopefully we can improve on that in future editions, because I agree that it was a little bit jarring at first, because it almost looked like we weren't acknowledging even some of our best bike infrastructure. It's just,
yeah, honestly, the brown lines for trail, I think, is kind of unnecessary if we already are using like green, for example, to indicate micromobility. Should just be that same color.
Green, yeah. I would agree. I think my biggest point of feedback would be from inaccessibility. Colorblind participants would likely not be able to view this.
Absolutely, yeah. Make a note of that for them for improving that in the future. I think it's also a little bit challenging when this particular map that we're looking at right now doesn't have this, but if we look at the combined version, the gradients of slightly purple, slightly green. Yeah, I think that
should probably just be changed to a thickness or dashed lines or something.
Something entirely different, and not just color dependent either.
And to kind of side with Commissioner Theo, if we're already discussing, if this is specifically a micromobility and bike and transit prioritization map, I don't think we need to be worried about trails. If that is a worry, I would say instead of having a different color, do it as a dashed line instead.
Yeah,
agree.
It's still very important to include it because, if you're looking for like certain routes between destinations, you can see that there's already a trail that covers that. So maybe it means that other options may not be as important or necessary, but yeah. Having the trails there is like a dashed or thicker line or something. Yeah.
Right. This map is strictly like county prioritization from the commission, so it wouldn't be like a route oriented map.
Correct, like on a transit perspective.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's trying to identify what do you want to prioritize within particular right of ways, but it's not looking at Columbia Pike and saying, okay, we're thinking about the A40 bus and its ability to get from, west to east, et cetera. So they're trying to look at individual roads and then determine what's the likely level of being able to make this comfortable for someone using biking or micromobility versus someone in transit. What do we want to prioritize given the current state of the road and what we want this to look like in the future? But it isn't so much route dependent where they're saying, okay, we want to have fast bus service on this particular part of Glebe, therefore we're going to prioritize transit. So,
right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
But this process is starting to get more into the policies and down to kind of what the working level that I think this commission in particular is more comfortable getting involved in. So We're moving past the high level vision, goals, aspirations portion, and we are moving more now into kind of the nuts and bolts of what these things are going to look like and what priorities will be focused on in the future. So more to come on this, and yeah, just continue to open it up for if anybody else had any other thoughts they want to share or questions.
Yeah,
I have,
go ahead.
2 quick things. One, I see something and I'm puzzled by it, and I'm wondering if you can explain this on the combined map that you're currently showing. Columbia Pike, for example, is gray, not even listed as priority 2 transit, priority 3 none.
It's only because this version that the bicycle committee wrote up, they did not use the combined map. This is the map that is only bike priorities.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
there's no purple.
It is not showing the
No transit at all on this one. Yeah, if we switch back to Ms. Obukoya, if we go back to the previous one, which would be, I think the tab just to the left of this.
Yeah, because I do see it is marked as priority transit, then none on the staff map, the 3rd slide. But
yeah, on this one you can see, and this doesn't have the markup of the the committee input, but you can see Columbia Pike itself is transit priority 2. The bike boulevards, both on 9th and 12th, are then listed as being the bike priority level number 2.
Oh, and I guess my second point, thinking back on the colored lines, another usability issue, maybe just trying to get away from the double lined green or purple and just going to like picking 4 colors, and those 4 colors, sort of like a 2x2 quadrant, quad sort of thing. And you just have different colors for the quads of bike, no bike, priority, or transit, no transit, and then just go that way.
Completely agree.
I can see, I can already see, unless I'm zooming all the way in, maybe this means I'm getting old, but I'm finding it difficult.
I think that it could absolutely be made a little bit more straightforward. And there, to your point, there are not that many combinations of what we're talking about here. I think we can just use 4 different colors at a minimum.
I do think it's very typical of us that our biggest feedback for you is around the maps.
That's very on brand for this commission.
Oh, one last thing. When do you want our detailed feedback in by?
We don't have a hard deadline with this because, again, they aren't having another meeting until, I want to say it's December 12th, off the top of my head. They're opening things back up to public opinion soon. I'll give outreach to everyone when there's an opportunity for us and everyone else in the public to give detailed feedback.
But would you say that just to give some sort of date within 2 weeks? Perhaps something within 2 weeks?
Within 2 weeks would probably be a good idea, because I think it would especially behoove us to have something in before they're more focused on the next round of analyzing public feedback. So that'd be great if we could say a tentative deadline of no later than November 13th.
Is there anyone that you want us to CC as well, or just directly to you, or?
I think just to me, and also Commissioner Shannon as well. He's also the other representative for the
Sounds good.
group.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
No, other than that, it's just very depressing looking at the Columbia Pike area. If you're a cyclist,
as a cyclist living on the west end of Columbia Pike, I agree.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Speaking of Columbia Pike, the amount of public outcry is increasing. Is there anything we can do from a commission standpoint?
On what? On the road completion project?
Yeah, don't say completion, it'll jinx it.
I hope that there is a lesson learned for DES somewhere in there of how this has been done, how they've rolled out phases and how they've had to go back over various areas. I've seen the communication as to the rationales for why it's been done the way it is. I don't find it completely satisfying. And I think especially more recently, the outcry has gotten worse because some of the businesses that are being impacted now are
shutting down,
deeply significant, and they're shutting down. And that portion of the Pike around Penrose has had so many, failed projects to start in the
Right.
last decade. I think it is really
Yeah.
unfortunate.
And I mean, we're kind of done with this agenda item, and now we're going into other matters with this discussion. But
Yeah.
you know, a lot of us have already commented on this commission that it's not a transformational project. So it's given going back to the debate with the trolley and what was promised and what we're getting, and it's definitely the county has fallen short on its promises back then. So I don't think it brings real questions about whether the county is able to deliver on these transformational projects with its current operation. So with that being said, you look at a smaller project, the 12th Street South, that seems to be moving pretty quickly. But then on Army Navy, the bike lane, that took forever, and that looked really simple. So I don't know. It's
Yeah. I mean, as a commissioner who's in this area frequently, my daughter will end up going to the elementary school near Arlington Cemetery on Columbia Pike. I'd be remiss to not say that I think, 5 years since we started this?
yes.
Yeah.
No, even longer. I think, did it begin?
When did they break ground? 18?
I thought it was 19.
Are we talking about
on the further
the
end
east, the
of Columbia
eastern end
Pike?
of it?
Yes.
No, that was it. I think it was around 19.
Yeah.
Just I
think
used
it's
to live on that
2019.
end of
Yeah.
Penrose, and my
Yeah.
oldest went to that school. We luckily only had to walk across the pike and then down into that neighborhood, so it wasn't so bad. But
Right.
coming from where you're at, more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's had a real negative for everybody, whether you get around car, bike,
Yes.
Yes.
the A40. I mean, it running every 6 minutes is great. It taking ages to get from the west end to Pentagon or Pentagon City is not ideal.
Right. And when we think about public communication about Arlington's transportation future and what you've been trying to do, we can't think about it in a vacuum. I think from a transportation lens, anyone who is in the vicinity of Columbia Pike is going to have a bit of a dissuaded view of what can be done. So not necessarily feedback for the commission or for you, but
I think it's valuable to bring up with the working group as a major concern of, how do we avoid having a stop sign at Scott Street on Columbia Pike in future editions of doing this type of work. I mean, it's just, it is, it's very disappointing, and it's taken just incredibly long.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions, comments? No. November 20th, and that will be a virtual one. Yeah. So right before Thanksgiving. All right, then I guess we can conclude tonight's meeting.
All right.
All right.
Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Brian, for joining us virtually.